Well, hi, I'm Jacqueline Hetchkoff, and today is June 10th, 1990, and I'm speaking with Tilla Starkland. And I'd like to begin with asking you what life was like for you as a Jew in your town or city before the war. Can you describe your family and friends and the life that you had to leave behind?
I have a sister and a brother. I'm the oldest. My sister is 3 years younger, and my brother is 3 years younger than my sister is. And we had a very happy family life. I went to school in Witten, and I went to the Lyceum in Witten.
In Germany.
In Germany, and when I finished there, I traveled by train to Dortmund, which was a bigger city, and I went there to the Höhere Handelsschule, which means the higher business school. And I learned there bookkeeping and stenography and all that. But I did not finish, I think, the last 2 months of the year because I took sick. I had a lung infection and I had to stop school, and my parents sent me to Switzerland.
Where
I
in Switzerland?
was there a while till I could come home and I felt better.
Okay. What year was this when you came back to Germany after your recuperation?
I was born in 1910, so the first 4 years, I think, you went to regular school, and then I went to the Lyceum, which was 4 or 5 years, I think.
So to place this in time, it was 2 or 3 years before you left Germany?
No, it was a little longer before I left Germany.
You left in 1937?
Yeah, I left in 1937.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 27 when I left Germany. So
did you work for a few years in
I
Germany?
worked at my father's business.
He was in men's clothing?
In Witten.
In Witten. Now you talked about your secular education. What about your Jewish education?
We had a Jewish teacher, and we went to Religionsstunde, which was, it was not only Hebrew school, it was just a combination of history and everything. It was not quite like it is here, like they have here the Hebrew schools.
Were you part of an Orthodox movement or Reform?
No, it wasn't Reformed and it wasn't Orthodox. It was in the middle.
What we call conservative now?
It was like here conservative, yes.
Okay.
But I mean, men and women sat separate. The women sat upstairs in the synagogue and the men were downstairs.
So there was still separation?
It was a separation.
In
yeah.
the school classes too, was there a separation between?
No, not that I remember.
Okay, were you bar mitzvah during
No,
that time?
no,
They didn't do
no,
that
we
with
didn't
girls.
do those.
What type of activities were you involved in? Were you involved in the
I
youth
was
movements?
in Jewish clubs, and we forgot what they were called.
The Zionist clubs?
It was not strictly Zionist, but it was Jüdischer Jugendverband, which is Jewish Young People's Association. And we had meetings together, and we went out of town on like hiking trips or overnight trips together, and this sort of thing.
So on holidays together. Can you tell me how the Nazis' rule in Germany first affected you? Hitler came to power
I
in
have very
1933.
little memory of the beginning. I only remember that one night they had rounded up all Jewish men in our town, And we were living at that time in a large private, like villa, you would say. So the owner was living upstairs and she had rented us the downstairs and the first floor.
Was the owner Jewish?
No, the owner was not Jewish. And one night, late at night, we heard the terrible noise on the door and a whole bunch of Nazis came. They had been looking for my father all over town and had all the other men and hadn't been able to find him because of the location where we were living. And so they finally found him and wanted to take him with him. My father was terribly scared and didn't want to go, so the bedroom was upstairs and we begged him to come down. We saw there was no choice. So he finally came down and they took him, and I remember there was a whole bunch of Nazis in uniform, and when he came down we had a few steps in the foyer before they went out. They kicked him with their boots until they got him out. And for days we didn't know what happened to him, where they had taken him. And I don't remember how long it was until he came back one day.
And you were in your 20s at the time, right?
Pardon?
You were in your early 20s
Yeah.
at the time?
And he was terribly hurt. And we had a large Catholic hospital in town, and we were very good friends with the chief doctor there, who was Catholic. And we talked to him, and he took him into the hospital and kept him several weeks first to get everything healed and taken care of.
He must have been badly beaten.
Pardon?
He must have been very badly beaten.
Yeah, pretty beaten. And then he kept him as long as he possibly could, because we felt it was a safe place where he was. And then he came home again.
How did your mother hold out under all this stress? She must have been very worried. And
she was very worried, but this became lifestyle almost. So, and then we had one bad experience. One night they went through town and demolished all windows. We had a pretty large store and had a large plate glass window, and they broke that in a million pieces. So it was boarded up, and after a while a high Nazi commissioner, somebody from the party, was coming to town, and they did not want him to see boarded up business. So they tried to force us to replace the glass. First of all, the size of glass was not available in town, and then it had to be ordered from somewhere out of town. And then it was terribly expensive, and we told them we couldn't afford that. So I don't know how the exact outcome was, but I mean the glass was ordered from out of town and came and was replaced.
do you know what year this was? Maybe 1934, 1935?
It must have been 34 or 35.
So they were already smashing windows in stores.
Yeah,
Witten is a small town.
It was, in the small town. And we know certain places we couldn't go. I mean, they had signs out, forbidden for Jews.
For example, was it the theaters or the parks?
The theater or a coffee house. Or I traveled once with a friend of mine who was visiting from South Germany, and we traveled together. We were driven from her sister's chauffeur and car to Cologne, which was a few hours drive. And we came there and we walked the streets. Cologne was a pretty big city. and wanted to have some coffee. And wherever we stopped and wanted to go in there was a sign out, forbidden for Jews, in Cologne, Germany.
And this is still 1934, 35,
Yeah,
early on.
Yeah. So that I remember.
How did you feel about that at the time? Did you feel it was something that would pass?
Yeah, definitely. Everybody said that cannot last. It will last a few weeks and will be over. And the few weeks stretched to months and months, and
until it became a way of life.
That's right. Yeah. So I had met my husband, and in 36, 35 actually, and 36. And he traveled to South America. So, and he told me he would send papers for me to come to Buenos Aires. He had been as a young man in Buenos Aires and went back to Germany and had been there again at that time. So I finally received the papers and picked up his daughter, and we traveled together from Hamburg.
Now, where was his daughter at the time?
She was with family of my husband.
Was your husband a widower?
Pardon?
Was your husband a widower or a divorcee?
Yeah, he was a widow.
And so his daughter was with family?
Yeah, was with family.
And when you received the papers, how long did it take for the papers to come? You have 6 months,
It was not too long.
Maybe a few months?
Few months.
So now you met your husband
in the meantime, I worked for almost a year. I was with a Jewish family in Krefeld. They were looking for somebody to be with their children. They still had a maid, but wanted somebody for the children. So I went there and stayed with them. I think it was a little over a year. Was with the children. And then when I received the papers, I came home and got ready to travel.
But you had met your husband before you took the job. And when did he leave for Buenos Aires?
He left in 36.
In 36.
Yeah.
So there was a year separation there. And then you went to Buenos Aires. And so, in terms of the deciding factor, you had this opportunity to leave, to follow
definitely.
Your fiancé.
Yeah, and I had a chance to send papers for my sister and brother, and then later for my parents.
So you were able to get...
To send papers to them so that they could leave. My father was at that time in the concentration camp in Oranienburg.
When was he put in the concentration camp?
While I was gone already. I left April. I left in 37. The trip took 3.5, 4 weeks almost by boat. And I had received word that he was in Oranienburg, and there was a period of 6 weeks when people could show they had papers to go to a different country. They would let them go. And that was a period of 6 weeks. So we tried very hard to get the papers for them. And actually I could only ask for papers after I was there for 2 years, and I wasn't there 2 years yet. But we paid a lawyer and paid lots of money to be able to get papers and get them out.
Now, was your mother and your father and your brother and sister all able to leave at the same time?
No, my brother and sister came first, and then a few months later my parents came.
Your parents came.
And my husband's parents came, and brother came. We got the whole family out.
That was very fortunate.
Yeah.
And it all started with your husband leaving for...
That's right, yeah.
Buenos Aires.
He had Argentine papers, so that's why he was able to do all that.
That's why he was able to leave. So his first act got 2 families out.
Yeah.
That's... Now, so You said you lived in Buenos Aires for 11 years.
Mhm.
Can you talk about your adjustment there and what things you needed? You had to learn a different language again.
I had Spanish language, but I didn't know. So I tried to learn it. At those times, still now, everybody had a maid. So you had to try to converse with her, and you learned from her. My daughter went to school there. And then we had a lot of friends, who were in the same boat, who came from Germany and talked German also.
So you were surrounded by
Yeah,
a group of refugees.
That's right,
Do you think
yeah.
that made it easier?
Definitely. And then we had the family slowly. My in-laws came, my brother, my husband came with his wife, and then my family came. So, and we had all to take care of them, got them housing and got them set up.
Now, your husband had already been set up.
Yeah.
Was he in business? Who did he
He
work
was
for?
in business, yeah.
So he had already set up his business.
Uh-huh.
Had he been in business for how long? A year or 2 years before all the family followed
He
him?
was there a year until when I came, and then we started to get the family out.
Now, coming back to when you arrived in 1937.
37.
And it was, you got married shortly after?
The same day,
The same day,
in
the day you
the
arrived.
immigration office.
So you had
We
been
got
on
married.
a boat for 4 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and you got off the boat and married someone you hadn't seen in a whole year.
Yeah, almost.
And then shortly after that, you found out that your father was in the concentration
Uh-huh.
camp, and you had to have a
The
huge
papers,
push to
yeah,
get
the papers.
the visas. Now, you said your brother and sister followed first.
They came first, yeah.
And
So they
then-
lived, my husband had rented a large house.
So you all lived together?
So we were together. We had my sister and brother there, and we had his brother and wife in the house. And before my parents came, we had rented an apartment for them and had furnished it and had it ready for them, and they
So
came.
there was a time lapse there. Exactly
A
what?
few months time lapse between them coming.
So, well, a few months is not too long to get so much
That's
accomplished.
right,
You must
yeah.
have been extremely busy
Yeah, we were.
and extremely worried all during that time.
We had a lot of trouble with my father, because when the ship arrived and it was in the port, and the medical personnel went on board to examine the people, and they said that my father had an eye, like infection, an eye sickness, and it was one sickness which did not allow him to come to the country.
Oh.
So my mother could get off the boat, and he was kept there. And they tried to send him back to Germany. So they had a regular exchange with boats, large boats coming from Germany once a week, and staying 1 week in the port and going back. And every time the boat was leaving, he was put on the boat to go back to Germany. So he naturally said he wouldn't go back, he would do something, he wouldn't go back to Germany. So we tried very hard to get him off the boat, and paid off a lot of money to all kinds of people to get papers for him to get off. And there were several Arabs. There was a whole group of people they were holding on that boat because they felt they all had the same eye sickness. And they finally called a prominent eye doctor to examine all those people. And he said he would operate on them if he would have certain machines and instruments. So if the families would agree to buy those, he would do the operation and the treatment so that they could stay, because in the meantime the war had broken out and no ship went back to Germany, which was a relief in one way for us.
So this was 1939?
Yeah. And he was kept in the immigration building, and we were allowed to send him meals to the building once a day, every day. So we had made arrangements with a restaurant, and they were delivering every day a meal for him. And then finally we paid quite some money for those so-called instruments to do the eye treatments, which were done then, and then he finally was released.
How long was he?
Change tapes.
Okay.
Then kept in the immigration.
Now, how long was this? Did this happen over a period of weeks, or did it take
No,
several
it
months?
was a long time. It must have been a year or longer.
A year
but
or longer?
I
that
don't
he was
remember
separated from
I
the
don't
family?
remember the exact time anymore.
So you and your husband and your stepdaughter and your brother and
My
sister
mother
and your
and my-
mother
yeah.
were living in the house together, where your father was
That's
separated
right,
from you for
yeah.
over
And
a year.
one person was allowed to visit once a day for half an hour or an hour.
Was it hard for your brother and sister and yourself and your mother to find jobs in Buenos Aires?
Actually, my brother was the only one who found jobs. My sister didn't, and my mother naturally didn't.
So your brother and your husband were supporting all of you during this time. Now, you lived in Buenos Aires for 11 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess you had a settled life there after all that time. What made you decide to leave?
It was my father started to, when he came out finally, all of this, he started to be sick. And I guess the concentration camp and everything he had gone through did it. So he was very sick, and we had him home, and he passed away quite young.
He passed away?
He passed away, yeah.
In what year? Is it 1940, before the war was over?
I have it written down at home.
Was it before the war ended or after?
Don't remember. I think it was after.
It was after the war.
But I'm not 100%.
Did he ever
sure.
talk to you about his concentration camp experience?
Very little.
What was the
Very
name of the camp he was in again?
Pardon?
What was the name of the camp?
Oranienburg.
And he talked very little about
Very
it,
little about it.
other than...
He was with a lot of people from our town, men. They usually took the men only.
So you just got the...
We got the paper ready, and they had to get ready and were put on a boat.
But there was evidence that he had been mistreated, that his health had suffered in the concentration camp.
Yeah.
How old was he when he passed away?
54 or 56.
54. Oh. So he died in his 50s.
Yeah.
So the family did feel that certainly his
definitely.
internment
was
had
definitely
a large effect.
And we heard later on that the eye sickness they claimed he had, he actually didn't. It was just the doctor was a German former German doctor, and he just wanted to make trouble for Jews coming into the country. So
he detained him for a year and got all the money from you just to, out of cruelty. So tell me why you left Buenos Aires and came to America.
We had the Perón government then, and it reminded my husband very much of the beginning of Hitler years in Germany. and he had traveled to the States several times and found that he liked or would like to live in the country and move.
Did you agree with him at the time? Were you?
Yeah, I did.
So you were just as
He took
willing?
me once on one trip along and to see, and I agreed to.
So you felt this was best, as opposed to staying in a country with political unrest again.
Yeah.
So once having been in that experience, you didn't want to.
That's right. Yeah.
You were not willing to risk it again.
That's right.
So you said you came when you left Buenos Aires. Where did you go first?
We came to Nashville. My sister and brother-in-law were living here in Nashville, so we landed in New Orleans and took the train from New Orleans to Nashville. We came by boat, by a big boat, to New Orleans, and then came by train to Nashville.
So
and went then to New York. And we lived for 6 months in New York before we settled back here in Nashville.
And your husband bought a business here?
Yeah.
Was this, what, in 1949, 1950?
It was 49.
49.
Because I became 48.
So how did you get an affidavit to come to America? Oh, from your sister and brother-in-law?
No, he got it as a business.
He got it as a business.
And I was born in Germany, so my quota was, you know, they have...
quotas,
yeah, quotas, and mine was low, so I could get mine pretty fast. I had to come through Canada. So we had a lawyer in Toronto. So he had arranged the papers, and we went to Toronto and got the papers, and I immigrated to the States. And my husband was on the Polish quota, which was much larger, so he had to wait a while before his number.
So you didn't come together?
We came together, yeah.
But it took longer to get the papers.
It took him longer to get the papers.
Do you have some idea of how long? Was it 6 months, a year to get the papers?
Something like it. I don't know exactly.
In 1949, there were a lot of people who wanted to emigrate.
Yeah.
People still in DP camps.
So I don't know exact how long it took, but not too long. He got his
not years,
papers,
maybe 6 months. So you were related to a Nashville family already. So you did have some family here that helped you with housing.
We were,
And so how did you learn English? Did you learn that from
I had learned English in school.
Oh, in Germany?
And in Germany. And we learned both languages, English and French. So, but my group of friends all preferred English instead of French. We had a young teacher, and we just loved English more than French.
So
I learned it in school.
Knowing English?
Pardon?
You came here knowing English?
Yeah, I knew English.
Did your husband?
Very little. Very little. He had picked up some from his business trips he had made before.
So did you have to help him learn the language?
No, by everyday living and business and so on, he learned.
He learned.
Yeah.
Did you help in the business at first?
No, it was a business I couldn't help. It was an electric supply.
Oh, electric supply.
Which was, so he bought the Nashville Electric Supply Company. So it was no business for women to help.
Yeah, not, particularly not at that time.
Yeah.
What differences do you see that have struck you in terms of your life in Europe and your life in the United States? Differences in culture and things that might have been hard for you to get used to?
Everything was different. Everything was different. I came from Buenos Aires, which was a very large international city. It was then a few millions big already. And Nashville was a very small town then. And I always compared and said where I came from, it was so and so, until I was told people don't like to hear that. And I didn't say it anymore. So.
But you had grown up in a small town.
Yeah, but it was, then I was very young and was with school, and so, I mean, it was different.
So you've gotten
it was
spoiled
somehow
by the big
different,
city.
yeah,
It
by
was hard
being
to
in a
come to
big
Nashville.
city, yeah. It's a big city, an international city.
How long do you think it took for you to feel at home in Nashville? To feel like you were
took
American?
a few years. Took a few years
But you do feel at home now?
Oh, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You've
I
been
mean,
here
the
since 1949.
largest part of my life I'm living here. So, no, I came 48.
So certainly a long time to get adjusted.
That's right.
What about your religious practice? Has that changed? Has that changed over the years? Do you observe, in terms of your Jewish observance, has that changed from Buenos Aires and from the level of observance you had when you were growing up?
We were, yeah, but in Buenos Aires, my husband's parents were quite Orthodox, and we belonged with them to an Orthodox large synagogue and observed. I mean, they.
Did you keep kosher there and everything?
No, I did not. But we observed and we took part in. I mean, we observed the holidays naturally and went to service whenever.
Whenever you could. Now, in Nashville, how has that changed from? In Nashville,
we belonged from the beginning to the conservative synagogue. My brother-in-law, my husband's sister's husband, was for 35 years cantor at the West End Synagogue. So he automatically became involved
At
and
West End,
belonged there.
the conservative synagogue.
Yeah.
Is that? But that's still probably very different from the religious, from the synagogues that you knew in Witten, Germany. So.
Yeah, in Germany it was very was small, and it. I don't know, we kept the holidays, but I mean that wasn't.
You don't feel there's been this huge
change? No,
no,
definitely not.
Have you ever returned to Germany?
One time.
Can you tell me about that?
It was terrible. My husband had an appointment with a lawyer in Cologne, and we had been traveling. I think we came from Israel then, and came to Germany, came to Cologne, and because he had the appointment. And I felt so terrible. Every man I saw on the street, I felt he must have been the one who came to our house to pick up my father.
The one who kicked your father?
I pictured it, yeah. And my husband tried to explain to me, and first of all, it wasn't the place where I used to live. And second of all, it was so many years after that those people were not the same people, couldn't be the same people. But I felt so miserable that we stayed the afternoon and evening, and he called his lawyer and told him I got sick and we had to go home, and he could not keep the appointment. We left the next morning.
So you stayed less than 24
took a cab
hours.
and took off to the airport and tried to get the first flight out.
What year was this? Do you remember?
Probably was 56 or 57, something like it.
Do you have any contact with the non-Jewish friends you had
No.
before the war?
No.
All contact
No.
with anyone
All contact.
is gone. How do you feel about the recent events in Germany, the reunification?
I am afraid that if Germany gets too big, it will be too powerful, and it might be a danger for the future.
So,
Matter of fact, I was invited. I had met in Florida years ago somebody by accident who turned out to be a schoolmate from my Hebrew school years. And he was so excited, and I hardly could remember him. And he said a brother of his living in California is working with the mayor of my town, and they try to get people to come to visit. And he called me the next day and said he talked to his brother and told him he had met me, and he was so excited, and he wanted to know if I would like to be invited with my husband to come to Germany to visit. So I told him I definitely wouldn't want to. So maybe I would change my mind or so. I told him no, I definitely wouldn't want to.
was this before or after the first? Was this before or after the incident that when you told me you went back for an appointment?
Oh no, this was much later.
This was
This
much
was
later.
Maybe 10 years ago, something like 8-10 years ago, probably.
So,
By accident, we met in Florida. I mean, they were friends of friends we had made at the hotel, and one day they said, "Oh, we get company, some friends of ours are coming, and you have to meet them." And when they came, they introduced, and when he heard my name and asked me where I came from, what was my maiden name, had a big to-dos about it. So.
But you knew you couldn't go back.
No, I didn't feel like going back.
And that's something you don't feel will ever change?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, a lot of people in that respect changed their minds, but I don't think I would feel like going back.
I'd like to take a few minutes now and talk about sort of your overall personal feelings about the experience. How do you feel that your pre-war and your immigration experiences changed you? The way you look at other people and the events of life and the world? Do you feel that that certainly this...
I experienced so much more than the general people here. I mean, with everything, they go into leaving Germany, and I mean, the experiences on a boat, and there were the Nazis already and everything, and then adjusting to a new country. And
you did that twice. You adjusted
and I did
to a new
that
country.
twice, and we cared a lot for the family and had a lot of obligations for the family. So you feel you have a lot of different experiences than normal people or normally people have.
Yes. In terms of how that shaped your view of life and what you've taught your daughter, just in terms of your philosophies of life, how do you feel that it's changed you?
My daughter, you cannot talk about Germany. She refuses to speak German. She wouldn't want, or anything which is German. I mean, it's just for her like, just something. I mean, she so I always told her, after all, German is an important language, and she doesn't want to hear about it.
So you don't want to return there, but
No, but she...
So you do speak German?
Yeah.
So you don't avoid all German language or
She
German
can
content.
speak it. I mean, she was sent to a Swiss school in Buenos Aires. It was a very fine school. And she learned it, but then she can speak it, but she can write, I mean, pretty nicely too, but she refuses to. Her husband is American, an American born. She got
Do they
married.
live in this country?
Yeah, they live in Louisville, Kentucky. And but she is strictly, everything is against German.
Do you wish she would, does this bother you? That she's so...
No. I mean, I accept it. I know that's the way she feels about it.
How do you feel about being Jewish? I mean, how has your experiences, your pre-war experiences and your immigration, has that changed? We talked about your observance level, but just about being Jewish in general. Has that changed in any way?
No. I always was Jewish, and I remain Jewish.
And that's who you are.
Oh, definitely.
And now that you've told me your story, what would you like other people to know? I mean, is there a message that you feel that you can share with others in terms of helping them understand this period of history and things that you learned?
That people try to find out, I mean, what the Holocaust in general did to people. I mean, I myself didn't experience anything, and I was fortunate enough to get my family out. But people shouldn't forget it, that it might and can happen anywhere, I feel. And unfortunately, they talk a lot of anti-Semitism all over, in this country and in other countries. And we met lovely, we have lovely friends, German non-Jews. They were living here in Nashville for a number of years. They worked for a German factory and came here to set up the machines and so on, and my husband worked with him. And we are still in touch, and they are very much pro-Jewish and pro-Israel and everything. But in general, I think you find very few people. They are exceptional people, and you find very few people who feel that way, like they do.
You find very few Germans that are very sympathetic to Jews. Was there anything else you'd like to add?
No, don't think so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.